The village where Amina lived was small and nestled among the rolling hills. Its vibrant community often bound by age-old traditions and a deep connection to the land. The air was thick with the scent of earth and wildflowers, and the days were long, stretching lazily from sunrise to sunset. In the centre of the village, Amina's family home stood modest but warm, a place she had once found comfort in. Her father, a kind-hearted but weak man, was the head of the household. Though he had a deep love for his daughter, his inability to stand up to his second wife, Zara, left Amina at the mercy of a cruel and oppressive home life. Amina's stepmother, Zara, was a woman hardened by jealousy and bitterness. After the death of Amina's biological mother, Zara took it upon herself to make Amina's life as difficult as possible. Zara's cruel nature was well known in the village, and she seemed to find joy in reminding Amina that she was nothing more than a burden. Zara often belittled her, making her perform all the household chores while her own children were allowed to rest. Amina's father, though loving, was a passive figure in their home, rarely intervening in Zara's harsh treatment of Amina. The pressure on Amina only intensified when her father fell ill. Zara saw it as the perfect opportunity to force Amina into a marriage with Kofi, a poor fisherman in the village. Despite the fact that Amina barely knew Kofi, Zara was determined to marry her off, believing that it would keep Amina in a position of submission. It was a decision made with a little regard for Amina's happiness or desires, a reflection of the control Zara had over her life. Amina, however, held on to dreams of a different future. She imagined a life beyond the boundaries of her village, where she could escape her stepmother's torment and find her own happiness. But the weight of duty, family expectations, and her father's declining health made it seem like there was no way out. She faced a painful dilemma: to obey and marry Kofi, or to defy her stepmother and risk everything she had known. The future felt uncertain, and Amina was torn between her dreams and the reality she was forced to accept. The wedding ceremony was simple, as most village ceremonies were. Amina had never imagined her own wedding would be like this. Nothing grand, nothing to celebrate. It was an arrangement, not a choice, and her heart was heavy as she stood by her father's side. The day was overcast, a reflection of the melancholy that clouded Amina's spirit. Zara, however, couldn't have been more pleased. She watched with an air of satisfaction as Amina was married off to Kofi, the poor fisherman, who was nothing more than a means of control in her eyes. The villagers gathered, some out of obligation, others curious, but no one dared to question Zara's decision. Amina, dressed in a simple gown, kept her gaze low, unable to look at the man who was now her husband. She had heard rumours about Kofi, the quiet man who lived by the river and barely interacted with anyone in the village. But none of the whispers had prepared her for the reality. She barely knew him, yet here she was, bound to him for life. Zara's eyes glistened with triumph as she watched Amina step into her new life as though she had won a victory. In her mind, Amina was now firmly in her control, and that made everything feel right. But for Amina, the ceremony felt like the final blow of her captivity, and as she walked away from her father's side, the weight of her sorrow was almost unbearable. That night, Amina moved into the small, humble hut by the river where Kofi lived. The hut was modest, with only a few simple furnishings, and the air was thick with the scent of the earth and water. The walls, made of woven reeds, creaked with the breeze, and the only light came from a small fire that flickered in the corner. Kofi sat silently by the fire, his back turned to her. Amina felt a pang of discomfort as she stood at the entrance, unsure of what to do. She had imagined this moment so many times in her life, but now that it was real, the reality was far different from her expectations. Kofi, who had been distant throughout the ceremony, barely acknowledged her presence. "Do you need anything?" Amina asked softly, but Kofi only nodded, his voice low. "There's food in the pot," he said, gesturing to the corner. He didn't look at her, and Amina felt a strange unease settle in her chest. She hadn't expected warmth from him, but she had hoped for something more, some kind of reassurance. As she sat down to eat, she noticed how quiet the night was. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the distant calls of birds. She felt like an intruder in his world. Her heart ached as she realized she knew nothing about the man she had just married. Her mind was filled with questions, but Kofi remained an enigma. As the night wore on, Amina lay on the straw mat in the corner of the room, unable to sleep. Her thoughts raced, her heart heavy with confusion and uncertainty. The days that followed only added to Amina's growing sense of confusion. She began to notice strange things about Kofi, things she hadn't observed before. The villagers treated him with a mix of respect and fear, as if he were someone of importance, but no one ever explained why. He rarely spoke to anyone, and when he did, his words were carefully chosen, as if every sentence was weighed with meaning. There was a coldness to him, a detachment that both intrigued and unsettled her. He didn't seem like the poor fisherman everyone thought he was. Amina's curiosity grew, but so did her doubts. He had hidden something from her, something she couldn't quite place, and she felt an odd pull to uncover the truth. Yet every time she tried to ask him about his past, Kofi would avoid the topic, quickly changing the subject. In the evenings, Kofi would disappear for hours, always returning with strange, cryptic answers when she asked where he had been. He seemed to live in a world of his own, and Amina felt as though she were on the outside, watching but never truly understanding. The more she tried to learn about him, the more she realized that Kofi's life was not as simple as it seemed. And as much as she wanted to trust him, a part of her remained wary, unsure of what lay beneath the surface of the man who had become her husband. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Kofi than met the eye, and that something about him, his silence, his distance, his mysterious ways, was hiding a truth she had yet to discover. Kofi's past was far from the simple life of a fisherman that he had built for himself in the village. Years ago, he had been the son of Nashir, a powerful and respected village chief, known for his wisdom and leadership. The village had prospered under his rule, and the people loved and revered him. Kofi had lived a life of privilege, surrounded by luxury and the respect of the villagers. He had been groomed to one day take his father's place as the chief, and his future had seemed certain. But all of that changed in one terrible night. His father's rule had long been challenged by a group of traitors within the village, people who envied Nashir's power and wealth. Led by a man named Jabari, these villagers plotted against Nashir, using deception and manipulation to turn the people against their chief. Kofi had been a young man at the time, unaware of the brewing storm until the night of the betrayal. His father had been struck down in a brutal attack orchestrated by his closest allies. Nashir's family was left in ruins, and Kofi, the only survivor, was forced to flee into hiding. The villagers, now under Jabari's rule, spread lies about the chief's family, erasing any trace of Kofi's lineage from the village's history. In the chaos of his escape, Kofi encountered a mysterious elder, a woman who had been a close advisor to his father. The elder, knowing that Kofi was the last hope of restoring balance to the village, gave him a magical ring. The ring, she explained, held the power to protect Kofi and to summon the strength needed to reclaim his rightful place. But it came with a heavy burden. Kofi would need to prove himself worthy of the ring's power by completing a series of trials. Only then could he truly restore his family's legacy and reclaim his throne. The elder warned him that he would need to live in secrecy until the time was right, for Jabari and his followers would stop at nothing to see him dead. With nothing left but the ring and the elder's advice, Kofi disappeared into the wilderness, where he lived in the shadows for many years, hiding his true identity from the world. The curse that plagued Kofi's family was rooted in the betrayal that had destroyed his father's reign. It wasn't just a loss of power, it was a curse placed upon Kofi and his bloodline. The elders had foretold that whoever wore the ring would eventually restore balance, but only after enduring immense trials and suffering. Kofi had always felt the weight of this curse upon him, as if his every move was guided by forces beyond his control. The ring, a constant reminder of his heritage, was both a gift and a curse. It gave him the strength to survive, but also bound him to a destiny he hadn't chosen. For years, Kofi had kept his identity hidden. He had lived in isolation, training in the wilderness, sharpening his skills, and learning to master the ring's power. He knew that revealing himself too soon would be disastrous. Not only would he be hunted by those who had betrayed his family, but the village itself would reject him. His father's legacy had been tarnished, and the villagers believed Kofi to be just another poor fisherman, living a life of obscurity. But deep within him, Kofi knew that his time would come. He had to wait for the right moment, when the village would be ready to accept him as their true leader again. Until then, he would continue to live in the shadows, a silent guardian of his family's legacy. Amina, meanwhile, had begun to notice strange things about her husband. The more she observed Kofi, the more she realized that he wasn't just the poor fisherman he appeared to be. His distant behavior, the way the villagers treated him with a mixture of fear and respect, and his mysterious comings and goings began to stir her curiosity. He never spoke of his past, and whenever she tried to ask him about his life before they met, he deflected her questions, speaking only of his present life by the river. But Amina couldn't shake the feeling that Kofi was hiding something important. One evening, as Amina sat by the fire preparing a meal, she overheard a conversation between Kofi and an elder from the village. At first, she didn't think much of it, assuming it was just a casual exchange. But as she listened closely, she caught Kofi's words. "It's time to reclaim what is rightfully mine. The ring must come to life again, and the village will know the truth." Amina's heart skipped a beat. What was he talking about? The ring. Reclaiming something. She had never heard Kofi speak like this before. Her mind raced as she tried to piece together the fragments of conversation. Could Kofi be someone more than just the humble fisherman he claimed to be? Could he really have some kind of connection to the village's past, a past that she knew little about? The more she thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to fall into place. The ring, the strange way the villagers treated him, his cold detachment. Was Kofi truly the man he had portrayed himself to be? Or was he hiding a legacy that could change everything? Amina's suspicion grew with each passing day. She began to ask more questions, trying to uncover the truth. Kofi's silence only deepened the mystery, but Amina couldn't shake the feeling that her husband was someone important, someone powerful, and that her life with him was far more complicated than she could have ever imagined. She knew she had to find out the truth, but as she did, she feared the consequences of unveiling the man behind the fisherman's mask. Zara's cruelty toward Amina knew no bounds. From the very first day Amina moved into Kofi's modest hut, Zara began a campaign of psychological torment. Even though Amina was no longer living under her roof, Zara's influence seemed to stretch far beyond the boundaries of their home. She had always been a woman who thrived on control, and now, with Amina married off, she sought new ways to undermine her stepdaughter's happiness. Zara's cruelty manifested in a constant barrage of harsh words and backhanded comments whenever they crossed paths. At every opportunity, she belittled Amina, reminding her that she was nothing more than a poor fisherman's wife, unworthy of any respect. When Amina visited her father's house, Zara would make sure to assign her the most grueling tasks: fetching water from the farthest well, cleaning the house from top to bottom, or cooking elaborate meals while her own children were allowed to sit and rest. Amina had become nothing more than a servant in Zara's eyes. The once warm relationship between Amina and her father was now strained, as Zara manipulated him into believing that Amina was simply lazy and useless. Amina's heart broke each time her father sided with Zara, but the thought of standing up to them both seemed impossible. Every day, her resentment grew, not just toward Zara, but toward the life she had been forced into, a life that seemed void of love, hope, or any real escape. Zara's cruelty, however, did not stop at making Amina's life miserable. She was far more calculating, and as the days passed, it became clear that she had no intention of letting her stepdaughter find happiness, even in her marriage. Zara had already made up her mind that Amina's life would be just as miserable as it had been before, and she began scheming to separate Amina and Kofi for good. Zara believed that as long as Amina remained married to Kofi, she would never be fully under her control. Zara could not stand the idea of Amina finding any peace in this new life, so she set out to destroy Amina's relationship with her husband. Zara began spreading rumors about Kofi, telling the villagers that he was lazy, irresponsible, and unworthy of Amina. She told everyone who would listen that Kofi was only pretending to be poor, that he had no ambitions, and that he had tricked Amina into marrying him. Zara painted Kofi as a man who could not provide for Amina, a poor fisherman who was nothing more than a burden to her. Slowly but surely, the villagers began to believe Zara's lies. Some of them started avoiding Kofi, whispering behind his back. Others stopped offering help when he needed it, and the once warm welcome he had received turned cold. Zara made sure to fuel this growing distrust, planting seeds of doubt in Amina's mind. She would visit Amina frequently, questioning Kofi's behavior and making sly remarks about his shortcomings. Zara even went so far as to suggest that Amina had made a terrible mistake by marrying a man who would never be able to provide for her. She knew that the more Amina doubted Kofi, the more vulnerable their marriage would become. Zara was determined to break them apart, to remind Amina that she was nothing without her, and that Zara was the only one who truly cared for her future. One evening, as Amina returned home from a trip to the market, she was met with a scene of chaos. Villagers had gathered outside Kofi's hut, their voices filled with suspicion and anger. At the center of the crowd stood Zara, her face twisted with fury. Her words were sharp, cutting through the tense air as she pointed an accusing finger at Kofi. "He's poisoning my daughter," Zara shouted. "That's why Amina has been weak and sick these past few days. She's been under his spell, and he's been feeding her something to control her mind. I knew he was no good from the beginning. The villagers exchanged uncertain glances, some whispering among themselves, while others looked at Kofi with distrust. Zara's accusation rang loud and clear, and the seeds of doubt she had planted began to sprout. Amina stood frozen, caught between the world she had known and the new life she was trying to build. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked at Kofi, her husband, whom she had grown to care for despite all the secrecy. Could it be true? Had Kofi been poisoning her all along? Kofi's expression remained calm, though Amina could see the deep pain in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but Zara was relentless, continuing to vilify him to anyone who would listen. "He is no better than a thief," she said, "stealing my daughter's happiness and life. What kind of man hides behind a mask of kindness and then does this to his wife?" The village, divided and confused, began questioning Kofi's true intentions. His reserved nature, which once seemed mysterious, now appeared suspicious. They had all heard the rumors that he wasn't truly poor, that there was more to him than met the eye, and now Zara's accusations added fuel to the fire. Amina felt her heart begin to fracture. She had no answers, just a sea of conflicting emotions and doubts. Torn between her loyalty to her stepmother and her growing feelings for Kofi, Amina felt lost. Finally, the need for clarity overwhelmed her, and she decided to confront Kofi. That night, after the villagers had dispersed, Amina sought Kofi out by the river. He was standing in the darkness, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Kofi, tell me the truth. What is going on? Why did my stepmother accuse you of poisoning me?" Kofi turned to her, his eyes filled with sorrow and regret. He took a deep breath before answering. "Amina, I didn't want to keep this from you, but the time has come. I've been hiding my true identity for so long because I feared what would happen if you knew. I'm not just a poor fisherman. I was once the son of Chief Nashir, the ruler of this village. My family was betrayed by those we trusted, and my father was killed. My mother died shortly after, leaving me as the last of my bloodline. The villagers, your stepmother among them, turned against us." Amina's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, struggling to process the words. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I had to keep my identity a secret," Kofi continued. "There's a curse on my family, a curse placed upon us because of the betrayal. I've lived in hiding for years, waiting for the right time to return. The ring I wear, it's not just a token. It holds the power to restore my family's legacy, but only if I can prove myself worthy. I married you not just because I love you, but to protect you. There's an ancient curse tied to your family's bloodline as well. Your stepmother is part of it, and she will stop at nothing to see the curse remain. I couldn't let her control you." Amina stood frozen, her heart racing as she tried to understand the weight of Kofi's revelation. She had always known there was something different about him, but this truth was beyond anything she could have imagined. Her mind raced with questions. Could it really be true? Was Kofi the last heir to the village, destined to restore the balance? Amina's thoughts spun in every direction as she struggled to process the revelation. Her stepmother's lies, her accusations, everything she had known about her life had just been shattered. She could feel the weight of the decision she now faced. Kofi, the man she had married in a quiet ceremony, was a man of power, of legacy, and of deep secrets. His words had struck her heart, and she could no longer ignore the truth in them. But at the same time, The reality of everything Zara had done weighed heavily on her mind. Her stepmother had always been cruel, manipulating the village and her father to get what she wanted. Amina knew that Zara would never let go of her control easily, and she would fight to keep Amina under her thumb. The choice was clear but painful. Would Amina stand by the woman who had raised her but tormented her? Or would she side with Kofi, the man who had protected her, and now revealed the truth of her own bloodline? As she looked into Kofi's eyes, a sense of clarity began to take shape. This was not just a battle for love, it was a fight for justice. Amina's heart knew what she had to do. She couldn't stay in the shadows of Zara's control any longer. The time had come for Amina to make her choice. The time had come for Amina and Kofi to face Zara, the woman who had tormented them both for far too long. With the truth about Kofi's identity revealed, the couple knew they couldn't continue to live in fear of Zara's cruelty and manipulation. They had to confront her once and for all. The confrontation took place in the heart of the village, where the villagers gathered, as they often did, for important matters. Amina, standing tall beside Kofi, felt a strange mix of fear and determination. The air was thick with tension, as Zara stood at the front of the crowd, her eyes narrowing as she noticed the ring on Kofi's finger, glowing with an otherworldly light. She had always known Kofi was different, but now the truth was undeniable. "I knew it," Zara spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You've come to ruin everything, haven't you? You think you can reclaim your father's throne, take what's mine, but you're nothing but a thief." Kofi stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "You betrayed my family, Zara. You turned your back on us, and now you're trying to destroy Amina's life as well. The village is mine by right, and I won't let you manipulate it any longer." Zara's eyes flashed with panic. She had been so sure of her control, so confident that she could use Amina to keep the village under her thumb. But now, with Kofi revealing his true identity, her carefully constructed world began to crumble. She tried to rally the villagers, her voice rising in anger. "This man is a liar, a fraud. He's only using magic to trick you." But before she could say another word, Kofi raised his hand, the glowing ring on his finger pulsing with power. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and a soft wind began to swirl around him, growing stronger with each passing second. The villagers watched in awe as Kofi's true strength manifested. The ring shimmered, and suddenly, the image of Kofi's father, Chief Nashir, appeared in the air above them, his spirit alive in the glow of the ring. "I am Kofi, son of Chief Nashir, rightful heir to this village," Kofi declared, his voice resonating with power. "You, Zara, have no place here. You betrayed my family, and your time has come to an end." The villagers gasped, their disbelief turning to awe. The spirit of Chief Nashir spoke, his voice echoing through the air. "Zara's betrayal has caused pain and suffering for too long. She has twisted the village's heart and soul. It is time for justice." The villagers began to murmur, some stepping forward, their eyes filled with respect for Kofi, while others exchanged fearful glances, realizing the truth of what had been said. The power Kofi had summoned, the presence of his ancestors, was undeniable. Zara's grip on the village weakened with each passing moment. The battle for power was over. Kofi had shown the villagers his true strength, and they could no longer deny his claim. With the spirit of his father backing him, Kofi became the leader of the village, the rightful heir who had returned to restore balance and justice. Zara, seeing her influence dissolve before her, tried one last time to manipulate the villagers. She raged. "This is not over. You are fools to believe his lies. He is not your leader. I will never let him take what's mine." But the villagers, now empowered by the truth, no longer believed her. They had seen the evidence with their own eyes. They had witnessed the power of the ring, the manifestation of Kofi's legacy, and the spirit of Chief Nashir. Zara's words fell on deaf ears. As the villagers closed ranks around Kofi, Zara was exposed for the liar and manipulator she truly was. Her hold over the village was broken, and the people began to shift their loyalty. No longer would they live in fear of her cruelty. In a final act of defiance, Zara attempted to flee, but the villagers, now unified under Kofi's leadership, stood in her way. She was forced to leave the village, her reputation ruined and her power shattered. Kofi, with Amina by his side, stood victorious. The village, once torn by lies and betrayal, now rallied behind its true leader. The time of Zara's tyranny had ended, and a new chapter in the village's history began. As the villagers celebrated their freedom, Kofi and Amina shared a quiet moment together, knowing that the battle was won, but the journey had just begun. Amina's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. The timid, oppressed girl who had once cowered under the weight of her stepmother's cruelty had been replaced by a confident and determined woman. Standing beside Kofi, she now understood her own strength, not just as his wife, but as an equal in their shared mission to restore the village's peace and prosperity. No longer did Amina feel the crushing weight of Zara's manipulations or the uncertainty of her place in the world. She had fought for her future, and in doing so, had found a new sense of purpose and courage. In the early days after Zara's downfall, Amina found herself at the center of the village's rebirth. She worked alongside Kofi, her newfound confidence shining through as she played a key role in guiding the village toward a brighter future. The villagers no longer saw her as just the daughter of a cruel woman. They saw her as a leader, someone whose resilience and strength had inspired them all. Amina no longer felt the need to hide in the shadows or remain silent. She spoke up in meetings, helped mediate disputes, and worked tirelessly to ensure the community's needs were met. Every step of the way, Kofi stood by her, and together they made decisions that would guide the village to a future of unity and prosperity. With Zara's reign of terror over, Kofi and Amina focused on healing the wounds that had been left behind. The villagers, once divided and fearful, began to rebuild their trust in one another. Kofi, with the wisdom of his father's legacy and the power of his ancestors, took on his rightful role as the village leader. He and Amina worked to restore peace, ensuring that every voice was heard and that justice was served. The village slowly but surely began to flourish again, with the community coming together to share resources, rebuild homes, and foster a spirit of cooperation. Under Kofi's leadership and Amina's guidance, the village began to heal from the scars of betrayal and division, and prosperity began to return. As Kofi and Amina stood together watching the village thrive, they knew that their journey had only just begun. The future stretched out before them, filled with challenges and opportunities alike. They had proven their strength, and together, they were ready to face whatever came their way. The love they shared, forged through hardship and trust, would be their guiding light. With Kofi's leadership and Amina's unwavering support, they looked toward the future with hope and determination. Their bond, rooted in justice and love, would guide them as they led the village into a new era where peace, unity, and prosperity would reign. The future was bright, and together they were ready to embrace it.